Before writing the code, let us try to understand the program execution model in Lambda. Even before that, let us try to do a recap of the Python execution model, how a Python program gets executed or how a Python code gets executed. We typically write functions or methods. Methods are nothing but functions which are written inside of a class. And whenever we write a Python code, we define multiple functions. In this pseudocode, you see there are two functions that I have written. One is the get underscore data and the other one is process S3 data. For the first function, get underscore data, it is accepting an argument in the variable A, and the function process S3 data is accepting two arguments in the variables bucket and object. Then we can call the function, let's say get underscore data, from this function also. In that case, we'll have to pass the value using a variable, and then this value of this variable will be assigned to this variable and all the process would happen. Now, if we have to execute this entire code, as a best practice, we define this if logic. If dunder name dunder equal to double quotes dunder main dunder, then execute all the functions one after the other. This is the best practice that we use while writing a Python code. Now you see the actual execution of the program will start in this if logic. So this if logic is the first line of code execution. Even though you have written the functions here beforehand, these functions will not get executed. It will come to the if logic and then the execution would start. So we call this particular line or the line after that as the entry point to this Python code, or the entry point of the execution of this code. So this is called the entry point of a Python program. So in a nutshell, entry point is nothing but the place or the line of program where the execution starts. Typical Python program, the execution starts at the if logic, if dunder name dunder equal to main. So in most of the Python programs, you will consider this particular line as the entry point of the program. So entry point is nothing but the place where the program execution starts from. Now, having said this, doing this recap, let us try to understand the Lambda execution model, how Lambda function executes the code. I hope you have noticed that Lambda function is not the code. It is the wrapper, which is a collection of various components. We provide the networking, we provide environment variables, we provide the timeout, the memory that we need, etc. And also we provide the code. Lambda function is not the code, it is a wrapper to execute the code. Now in Python program, you know how do we write the code, right? So how will we write a Python code in a Lambda function? In the world of Lambda, it is called as handler. Handler is nothing but the entry point or the Python function which is used as an entry point to the code. From the previous slide, you know what an entry point is. Entry point is nothing but where the code execution starts from. So we'll have to define a function and we'll have to tell Lambda that this is the entry point or this function is the entry point of my Python code. And in Lambda, that is known as handler. So if you write a Lambda function, essentially we write a code or a Python code inside of a Lambda function. So in this case, I have just using the process S3 data. And here I have two arguments. One is event and the other one is context. So the name process S3 data is provided by the user, which is us. And then the event and context, these two are kind of keywords. You can use other variable names also, but as a best practice, whenever you write a Python code for Lambda, you should use the event and context variable only. Now, this process S3 data is the entry point to the code. Of course, we can write other functions also, and we can mention that particular function to be the entry point of the code. But in this case, I'm defining the process S3 data as the entry point to the Python code. And we have event and context here. Event and context are something which is provided by the trigger. A Lambda function gets executed whenever there's an event. Let's say we upload a file in S3 or there's a data in SQS or Kinesis or Kafka, then a Lambda function will get triggered. Now, when the trigger is done, there should be a way for that service, for that AWS service to send data to the Lambda function. And event variable contains that data. So event variable would be having all the data which is generated by the event. It can be Kinesis, it can be Kafka or MSK, it can be S3 also. So in case of S3, it will have the object name, the bucket name, and few other information. For Kinesis, it will have the Kinesis stream name along with that the data. For Kafka, it will contain the topic name and data of the topic along with other information. So the trigger or the service where we hook up the Lambda function, that service will send data in this event variable. So whenever we start a program, whenever we define the entry point, that entry point will contain the data which is sent by the event or by the service. So in this case, process S3 data is the entry point where the execution would start from, and in Lambda lingo, it is called as handler. We'll have to define this handler when you write the code. So let's say our trigger is uploading a file in S3 bucket and folder. So whenever you upload a file, it would trigger the Lambda function, and S3 would send the data to this event variable or via this event variable. We'll get the data of the event in the event variable of the handler function. Handler function is nothing but the entry point. So it can contain bucket name, object name, metadata along with other information. I'll show you that shortly. So this is how the Lambda code execution happens. So you have to define a function which would be the entry point, and that function will contain the event data in the event variable. Context variable contains the underlying hardware information. If you have to get the underlying hardware information, we can use the context variable, which we will not use in our case. So for data processing, event is the variable that we are bothered about. And after that, we can define other functions, we can define other variables, we can define environment variables, we can get environment variables using the OS module or OS library, etc. So the event data or the event notifications are received via the event variable. Now the event variable would be a JSON document, and in case of S3, it would contain bucket name, object name, size of the object, name of the event, whether it is an upload or a copy or a delete, etc. If it is Kafka, then the event data would contain other information along with the data in the topic. In case of SQS, it will contain the SQS queue name along with the message. In case of Kinesis, it will contain the Kinesis data streams name along with the message. By the way, Kinesis data streams is similar to Kafka topic. So it would contain the Kinesis data stream name along with the message. For Kafka, it would contain the topic name along with the message in the event variable, and the data would be retrieved as a JSON document. So I've shown you this OS module which we get out of the box from Python. What if we have to have other Python dependencies or modules or libraries? For example, let's say we are connecting to a database using this Lambda function, and it's a MySQL database, so we need the PyMySQL module. So in that case, what do you do? So let's say it is PyMySQL module. We have to create a zip file and we have to upload the zip file in an S3 folder. It is easier said than done. That's why I'll show you this in the hands-on. But we'll have to create a zip file at the root directory where the library is contained, and then we'll have to upload that zip file in an S3 bucket, and then we'll have to provide that zip file along with the Python code when you create the Lambda function. So before doing the hands-on, let's look at the S3 event data, and this is how it is sent. I hope you can see what data is there. The data is contained in records, and record is an array, by the way. This is only for S3. For Kinesis, it is different. For Kafka, it is different. So for S3, it will contain event version, event source, the region name, the time, the user who triggered the event, what are the request parameters, what are the response elements. And for S3 specific data, we'll get something like this. Inside of this S3 document, we'll get the bucket name, who's the owner of the S3 bucket, the ARN of the S3 bucket, and the object key. Object key is nothing but the name of the file. In this case, it's a very random key. I have taken this from AWS documentation, but it will contain the name of the object or the file Also the size of the file. So these are the important information. So once we get this, we'll have to copy the data or read the data from S3. Either you can copy it to the temp directory that I have shown you earlier while creating the Lambda function, and then we can read from there, or we can read directly from S3 also. For Kinesis, it would be a little different. It would contain records and then Kinesis related information like partition key, data, what is the key of that partition, what is the data, and few other stuff. Similar thing would be there for Kafka also or MSK also. So now these event data would be generated by the service. It can be S3 service, it can be SQS, it can be DynamoDB, it can be Kafka, it can be Kinesis. All these event data would be generated by the AWS services, and then it would be sent to the Lambda function. Now in Lambda function, these event data would be received in the event variable of the handler function. Just to show you the event data for S3 and Kinesis that I have shown you, all those event data would be present in this event variable of the Lambda handler function. The name of the Lambda handler function can be something else also, but the data would be there in the event variable. So I'll have to extract the variable and their values from this event variable and then do the processing. So this is how the Lambda execution model works. To understand it better, let us do a hands-on wherein we'll upload a file in S3, and the moment we upload a file, it should trigger a Lambda function. And the Lambda function will read the records of the file and do some lightweight processing and save it back in S3. So let us go ahead and do that.